All right. Welcome to the first episode of the Latest.com show. I'm Igor Derysh. Joining me, Peter Van Buren, Josh Patton, Eric Carriere. We're all spread out throughout the United States and even Canada, as Eric is bringing the diversity to this otherwise very white, very male panel. Josh just mentioned that the Congress passed a spending bill today to avert a shutdown for a few months. Josh, how do you feel about that? Are we going to be playing games with Planned Parenthood funding and a $500 million of a $3 trillion budget again in a few months?
Well, I absolutely think that the games are going to continue. I like that the adults seem to have won out, at least in the short term, so that there's not going to be a shutdown. But I definitely think that what is key to the GOP 2016 strategy is the hoping to increase conservative turnout with abortion. Everyone remembers in 2004 when gay marriage was really big with during the John Kerry Bush election. Now, while individually in those gay marriage states, the issue didn't actually help Republicans or hurt them, but overall turnout for conservatives was up 5%. And I think that probably has a lot to do with all of the cries of the very fabric of America is at stake here. And I think that they're hoping that with abortion, that's even a more visceral issue. So I think that's going to be still huge. I don't know if they'll shut down the government in December. I think it'll be a staring contest between McConnell and Cruz.
Isn't it irresponsible to just do this over a tiny fraction of the whole U.S. budget? $500 million when we're talking about almost $4 trillion budget? Peter?
It's a tiny bit of money, and these issues are largely designed to just inflame people. As Josh was saying, you want to get people out to the polls. You want to give them an emotional issue to focus on. That's a whole lot easier than trying to say to people, look, we really don't know what we're doing running the country. We really don't know what we're doing overseas. We really don't have much of a plan to solve the problems of employment, of the economy, of racism in the United States. And since we can't do anything about those, we're just going to rant and rail about something else we can't do something about, but one that engages you emotionally. And as Josh was saying, this year it looks like we're shaping up for it to be Planned Parenthood. It's typically guns, gays, or abortion. And I guess this year abortion drew the short straw, and off we go.
Well, this year
I think it speaks volumes to the.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think it speaks volumes to the radicalization of the Republicans in the current United States society. In the past, Republicans have always been very conservative, very fiscally conservative, and careful with their policies. But more so this year, they've come out in full force with religion as a major topic. And while it's always been important, it's never taken a step this far where it's been the focal point and people are actually basically bringing their Bibles to debates now and using them as a policy point. Before, Republicans were a little more quiet about it, even though they were still ultra conservative and religious.
Right. Well, Planned Parenthood is one obsession that they currently have. Another obsession is Clock Kid, Ahmed Muhammad over in Texas. Why do you think they're so obsessed? I mean, today we have this story where's the that he could have been a gang leader, that he was suspended for several weeks for blowing bubbles. Why are they so obsessed with this kid and smearing a 14-year-old? Eric?
I don't know.
I think with the Clock Kid, it stems out of the United States obsession with always having some enemy, either internationally or racially. In the Cold War, obviously, it was the Russians and those communists. And in the modern United States, because the Middle East has so much turmoil, they always seem to pick Muslims as this incompatible enemy. And so any source of the Muslim religion at home or Islam is something that they see as a force that they need to fight against. And because of the whole threat of terrorism, and in the past, there's this sour taste that most conservatives or Republicans have towards beating down those kind of situations.
Josh?
Yeah, if I could jump in, I don't know why I'm surprised at this one because call me an optimist, but I still thought that we had enough, I don't know, sense of I don't want to say dignity because that is obviously not the case. But I just thought that a 14-year-old kid would be off limits. I know that we need some sort of left-right political football to kick around. But it seems really disgusting to me that it's a teenage kid, whether he invented a clock or didn't, or, whether he's just, my favorite one is the news that this was a kid who orchestrated the whole thing because he knew he'd go viral, which if it is, he's even smarter than I originally gave him credit for.
That's really a kid who's playing the long game at that point, yeah.
Right. But yeah, like the one thing though, I think that, again, these are the Neanderthal wing of conservatives that we were talking about, that are complaining about the clock kid and the thing about him blowing bubbles is a troubled past. The thing that some conservatives mentioned, and I did write this up for Latest, was that, what this really is evidence of is maybe not so much Islamophobia, although there's definitely some of that here at play here, but also the fact that zero tolerance policies are unbelievably stupid. They limit adults and like the teachers and the police and their options when dealing with students. If a kid brings, anything that looks like a blade, maybe it's a sculpting blade, or maybe it's, some other gun, but because of zero tolerance, they are now suspended, possibly arrested. It's nonsense.
That's a great point. You had that other kid get in trouble that was, I don't think he was actually suspended at the end of the day, but they were threatening to suspend the kid that was defending the blind kid from a bully. Doesn't that kind of policy just tie normal people's hands behind their back and not allow them to just exact rules based on the situation?
Sure. I mean, we've had cases where, and we've reported on these on latest.com, where kids have pointed fingers and been accused of weapons. There was a kid who chewed a piece of toast allegedly into the shape of a gun, and he got in trouble. The idea of these crazy rules and the enforcement of them is you've got to kind of start with something. In other words, if a teacher said, finish that toast and let's get off the bus, then there's no problem. It's as soon as someone overreacts and lets their prejudices and their fears prey on them that it kicks these things off. This kid with the clock is very, very sad. Again, that we're picking on a child, that we're allowing our prejudices and our fears to be stuffed into the mouth of a 14-year-old kid in Texas is sad, and it reflects very poorly on us. But it's something that never should have happened. It's never a matter of whether the school's hands were tied. It's a matter of whether common sense was ever present in that school. It was a stupid little science project. The kid was obviously not a threat to anybody. In fact, the police admitted from the earliest moments that they knew this wasn't a bomb. But for a teacher who also had no idea what bombs look like, to suddenly overreact and decide that something terrible was happening here, and for everyone down the chain to immediately kick off these so-called protocols, really speaks poorly of us. When the teacher, the woman teacher who declared this a bomb, of course, based on her extensive experience in EOD and SWAT and all the other things that they teach in teachers' colleges. Now, as soon as she said, "Oh my God, that's a bomb,"
English teacher, she might have read.
Oh, well, fine, okay. I mean, yeah, well, no, I mean, it must have been buried in Mark Twain, the part of I skipped when I was in school. Because you can't trust those people either. The idea is that if someone would have said to her, Maggie, it's not a bomb. Look, this is some dweeb who sits in the back of my class all the time, and he put this stuff together at home, and we humor him when he does this because he has no friends. Then the whole thing just would have stopped there, as it should have. But instead, it's like, oh, it's a bomb, and oh, it's a brown kid, and oh, we're going to get everybody riled up, and oh, we've got a protocol we can kick into place, and all of a sudden these things simply spin so far out of control that it ends up catching into the media, which rationalizes the thinking of it, and it kicks off the same old stupidity on Fox, and somebody wakes Hannity up and tells him there's something new And it just makes us look silly. If I was sitting across a border like Eric is in Canada, I'm not sure I could actually stay sober or keep a straight face, reading the news out of the United States.
Eric, did that story get a lot of play in the Canadian media? The Clock Kid story?
So. I mean,
ask him if he's sober.
But
I already know he's not. We were talking earlier.
No. But in terms of the media play, it got picked up and it circulated, but it didn't last for weeks and weeks like it seems to in the United States. They tend to focus on the bigger issues, and with our upcoming election, of course, there's all the campaign drama, which is mild compared to Trump and other things. But yeah, my real question is, though, would this have even been a story if it was a white kid who brought a homemade clock to school? I'd say no, personally.
No,
of course.
I mean, it wouldn't have been.
It's obviously a racially charged issue.
But if it had been some kind of white kid zero tolerance thing, it would have been maybe not as big of a story, but it still would have been a story. I mean, we've done them before. The Pop-Tart kid who made the gun, and that's.
Yeah,
but people tend to not pay attention.
Where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
Once you make the kid brown and Muslim, however, it feeds into all sorts of existing narratives. Sure. I mean, a kid chewing a Pop-Tart, forgive me, I said earlier it was toast. And I know that our readers understand how exquisitely and meticulously I am with details. And I do apologize sincerely for that. But the idea is that sure, that's a story. Man bites dog, dog bites man, kid bites Pop-Tart, and all of a sudden, there's some news value there while we wait for the next Trump or Hillary story to flow past. But the fact that it is a Muslim kid suddenly feeds this story down these dark corridors that used to be kind of hidden in America, but now we seem to be shameless about pushing them up to the forefront. There were crazy conspiracy theories that moved into the mainstream media about this kid and ISIS and who knows what else. It speaks something very, very sad about us that we let these things bubble up, that the media doesn't just relegate them to high-class outlets like latest.com so we can smear them around and focus on the larger issues such as, does Canada have a government and do they actually hold elections there? I mean, I think a lot of Americans are unsure.
Did we break that? Canada has elections.
I'm just finding out now that Canada is a separate country. I really,
yeah, but
honestly,
Stephen Harper.
Yeah, I really thought Stephen Harper. I thought he's the guy who took over from Letterman. Honestly,
12 years now.
Yeah.
Almost 12
when
years.
Trump becomes the king of Canada, right?
When Trump becomes president,
Letterman's been off for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know Letterman was off the air for 12 years. Wow.
Oh no, sorry, I'm talking about Harper and Power.
Yeah, good to know. Good to know.
All right. Well, the conservative the conservative obsession with the Planned Parenthood, with the clock kid, doesn't that? I mean, Josh, you wrote about this the other day about how everything is safer. Mm-hmm. There's less cop deaths than ever before, and yet we have this war on cops. There's less murders, rapes, kidnappings across the board. Terrorists don't kill pretty much anyone in America. Why are we shitting our pants all the time about these non-threats that we perceive as threats?
It's a question that I ask myself a lot, given what we do, because, these things, to report on the story, even to debunk it, makes it a bigger story than it is. But if you don't debunk it, then just, your Facebook post shared by your uncle with a minion meme and a conservative message is your only source of information on the topic. So I don't know if it's the snake that's eating its own tail or what, but I don't know why we're so scared now. It's maybe because it's good politics. Like, fear is just it's cheap and easy to get attention. It's.
Well, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not really
I think about this all the time, and I don't know.
I'm not really talking about the politicians. Just people in general, when they're polled, are constantly saying, "Well, crime is up. Crime is a big problem. Crime is up." Yet every statistic shows that crime is down across the board in pretty much every major market in America. Do you think that's entirely the media's fault? Peter, Eric?
I think a major issue
Well, there's
is that
the politics of fear is very profitable. For 14 years since 9/11, I'll focus on the terrorist side, but I think a lot of this crosses over to regular crime in America anyway. First, I mean, there's politics of fear that is very profitable. It's profitable to politicians who get reelected by promising to do something about it. It's certainly profitable to companies that sell technology and equipment to organizations like the NSA that need excuses to go ahead and further their own positions and their own power. So those are all good reasons to keep things going. And if you've been saying things are scary and dangerous for 14 years, it gets hard to stop. If you're going to stop, you have to say why it got better, and you have to suddenly back down from all those things you've been saying. However, even though statistically I think crime is down, as Josh correctly reported on latest.com, America still remains one of the most violent places on the planet, even with our lower statistics. In terms of gun deaths in the United States, you've got to move into actual war zones to find places that have fewer people killed by guns than here in the United States. We have the city of Miami, for example, alone has more gun deaths in a year than Colombia. And for countries like Japan or Sweden or places where they have no gun deaths at all, I mean, even small towns in America have more people shot to death than whole countries like that. Many of the statistics for other types of crimes and assault, rape, theft, whatever, this is a dangerous country. And I think people are correct in being concerned about that. And even though the numbers do go up and down, I live in New York City where the mayor is constantly bragging about how aggressive policing has lowered crime. This is still a place with an awful lot of crime. People get shot here all the time. Last weekend, 50 people were shot in the city of Chicago. There weren't 50 Americans shot in Afghanistan last week or last month, for that matter. And so numbers go up and numbers go down, but the bottom line is that we do remain a country where it's dangerous, but unfortunately the danger is not from terrorists, it's from ourselves.
I think you inadvertently just answered Igor's first question as to maybe not, but provided a clue as to where we can look to answer that question, because everything you just said is right. None of it's new information. And even as you were saying it, I sat here thinking, well, I'm totally fine with all this. And I think that's because as Americans, and because gun ownership and the Second Amendment is so key to the American identity for a lot of Americans, myself, it's not even close to my favorite amendment, but still, I've accepted that's the danger of living in America. We're in a country that has guns and a place where people get shot. And yet it's the sort of fear that with the crime is up and the war on cops that Igor was mentioning, that's somehow running counter to that narrative, even though they're the same story. That's the same problem, just from different perspectives. On one hand, it's really resonating with people because it's not about the guns. When you make it about the guns, that's all people hear.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great point. I'm sorry. That's a great point Peter made, but, we both lived in New York in the 90s, and we remember how it used to be. So when you look at it in perspective, do you really feel unsafe in New York compared to how you felt maybe 15, 20 years ago?
Well, no, but what I do is feel unsafe compared to how I felt when I was in Japan or the UK or other places. And, I live here. I'm an American. I understand what it's like here, and I act the way I need to act in order to make it through each day and get my stories up, which is really the whole point. But the idea is that I think we're far too casual about simply accepting the fact that there's only one way to live, which is the way we do here in the United States, in the midst of a culture of violence where, oh, yeah, hey, we talk about this amongst ourselves. Josh, are you going to do the mass shooting today? Oh, no, Eric's already got the one at the school. Oh, no, I meant the one at the church. Oh, yeah, okay. Josh, you get that one, all right? Because Peter's still doing the follow-ups on yesterday's mass shooting. So, things like that. And we just accept that there's going to be a mass shooting on a regular basis. I did a story recently about how schools are installing gunshot detectors, the same technology that's used in wartime and is used here in New York City to automatically detect where a gunshot has taken place. The idea that we're wiring our schools like that should strike us as fairly alarming. It should terrify us that we've sort of given up on worrying about stopping mass shootings and are now sort of focused on, making them more efficient.
In fairness, Peter, it's the as far as like it's wiring up the school, that is shocking. But I also don't think that, I feel like, and again, I don't have the stats handy. I didn't think to refresh my memory, but I know there's one out there where it says that, as far as schools go, it's still a very safe place when it comes to the problem of gun crime and gun violence. Like the most dangerous place is the place that's the most sacred, according to, our American Second Amendment ethos, is people's homes. Most gun deaths happen in people's homes. And so I feel like that the wiring the school like that is sort of that's a way to deal with and make ourselves feel safer with the larger problem, because even though, that school will probably never have a shooting, let alone a mass shooting, it's easier to fix that problem that small problem than the big one of, husbands killing wives, wives shooting husbands in their own home.
Well, I mean, if that stops, then what are we going to write for latest? But Peter brought up...
it'd be all Dancing with the Stars.
Peter
poop
brought
jokes.
up
We still have poop jokes.
Peter brought up that in general, we're a much more dangerous country than Japan and the others. And, every mass shooting comes up, everyone, Obama goes on and says, oh, I wish I didn't have to do the press conference every time. But how do you propose that we stop, the frequency, at least, of mass shootings, or just murder in general? I mean, are we supposed to take away everyone's guns? Don't you think that would end poorly? Peter?
If I had a quick answer for any of that, I'd be out there pushing Trump off the stage and running for something myself. I think one of the very first things is, again, this basic understanding that maybe it just doesn't have to be this way. I would hope that none of the schools where my kids go will ever have a mass shooting. But at the same time, I just can't stop but wonder if there's any other country in the world that wires its schools up for gunshot detections. That seems to be something that we have built into our way of living here in the United States. There is no magic bullet. Get that? You saw what I did there, right? Okay. There is no magic bullet on these things. But there are smart things you can start doing. You can start saying that, like all of the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment is not a blank check. There are limits to all of the parts of the Bill of Rights. And you can start by saying there is no reason whatsoever that Americans need to be able to have automatic weapons or assault rifles or dum-dum bullets or high-capacity magazines or anything else like this. We license car drivers. We license people to teach schools. We license people to perform medicine. We license hairdressers in the United States. But the idea being that any drunk idiot can wander into a gun shop and walk out with a lethal weapon that fits into his pocket seems to be actually insane. So there are some things we can do that will affect the problem. Solving the problem? No, there's not a solution.
Josh, you want to say something?
I'm not sure if any of you are familiar.
What you were talking about there is, there was a post I did a few weeks ago that showed that most, gun owners and Second Amendment advocates surveyed actually liked the idea of a lot of the reforms, the background checks, certain other things. I think like maybe being required to take a gun safety course before you get your weapon, that they're all fine with those things. Yet, and here's where we get into the politics of it, because with the ideological conservative media that is driving sort of the way conservatives get their information, and with the gun lobby, the NRA and others, they've made it a non-starter to even suggest any kind of gun control, even the ones that the primary voters themselves think are good ideas.
Well, I mean, just to go back to the New York thing, I mean, it's incredibly difficult to get a gun in New York City. This is it's like a 6-month process. You got to pass courses. You got to spend thousands of dollars. And yet, again, like you said, people get shot here every day. Up until a few years ago, Chicago had a complete handgun ban. So did Washington, D.C., so did some of these other places. It didn't seem to affect, I mean, no, you couldn't go into a gun shop and buy a gun, but it didn't really reduce the frequency. So how do you stop illegal guns? And when you look at, it's not just, inner city like gangs and things like that with the scratched off serial numbers. When you look at some of the kids that have gone into schools and shot up, movie theaters or churches, they didn't get the gun legally. They got it from a parent.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these guns, started off their life. I mean, all of these guns, I'm sure, started off their life legal at some point. As far as getting a gun in New York City, well, the easiest way to do that is to get on a bus. It's $35 to walk to Washington, D.C., take the bus over to Virginia, and you can purchase a handgun there with a while you wait background check, and get back on the bus and come back to New York. And it's not like I'm the only person who's figured that out. So as long as every jurisdiction has its own rules on guns.
Come to PA a lot.
Yeah, that's probably even closer. So, I mean, the idea is as long as every jurisdiction has its own rules on these things, then one city cracking down is really not going to make a big effect on stuff. At the end of the day, there is, of course, the problem of we are who we are. I'm working on a piece right now about prisons. And the idea is that countries' prisons tend to reflect that country. Surprisingly, people in Norwegian prisons don't get beaten and raped by gang members. But the gun thing, again, you have to sort of do what you can do within the certain limits, and there are a lot of rational ideas out there that may help. As Josh pointed out, it runs up against these bizarre politics that now control the United States. The same politics that tell us, despite fairly commonsensical rules on abortion, 40 years ago, we're still arguing about that. Despite the Supreme Court saying that same-sex marriage is now the law of the land, we're still arguing about that. And silly women with the world's worst mullets, I mean, she looks like Joe Dirt in Kentucky, trying to say, I'm just not going to follow those rules because I don't like them and they are against my faith. Well, my faith says I shouldn't have to pay the 50% of my income tax that goes to defense, but the Pope didn't come and visit me to give me a pat on the back about that. So you do what you can, but you accept what you must as reluctantly as possible. You certainly don't have the blasé attitude that we have about, mass shooting, guy got gunned down 3 blocks from me, meh.
Eric, you're up in Canada. How do you guys feel about the immense amount of people that we kill on a daily basis, and why haven't you guys built a wall across your border yet?
Well,
they don't have Donald Trump
to be honest,
yet.
I mean, gun crime across the globe really it's all relevant to the context of the size of your population. While Canada doesn't have statistics that rival the United States, we do have our fair amount of shootings as well, and I bet if you were to average it out with the populations, it wouldn't be anything too staggering. Now, I live in Toronto, which is the largest city in Canada, and there are neighborhoods in this city that you would not want to go to at nighttime unless you wanted to get a piece of lead in your head. And that's just the reality of it. There's just certain neighborhoods you avoid. Now, I happen to live in a good area, in the center of the city, but yeah, like Scarborough or Jane and Finch areas are terrible. You would never go there at nighttime. And in terms of comparing it to the United States, I think it's all relative. And on our discussion about how do we prevent it, you can. I mean, humans are violent by nature. That's the way we are. That's never going to change. The moment the gun was invented, it was an invention that was going to stick around and cause a lot of harm for humanity. But I do think our society today is a lot less violent than it was historically. There's a fascinating article written by a Harvard psychologist named Steven Pinker. Have you guys ever heard of the History and the Decline of Violence?
No, I only read latest.com.
Fair enough. No, it was something we touched on while I was in university, but he essentially argues from the platform that humanity was far more violent in the past than it is today, and that even though with the modern invention of more dangerous weapons like guns and
all jokes aside, I think I cited that in the one thing I did talking about how the world's safer.
It's a pretty popular article, yeah. So, but what he argues essentially, it is safer today than it was in the past, because if you look at, let's say, the medieval ages, for example, we glorify knights as these like holy and heroic people, but in reality, they were warlords that went across their counties and countries, slaying people to gain little pieces of land and, you know, more stuff for their estate. Today, we don't have that. I mean, if we look maybe in Africa, there's still warlords and stuff going on. But here in the United States, you know, we don't have warlords going across the country, killing people to gain new pieces of land. And so while it is more violent today, it's only more violent, I guess, maybe because we have the ability to publicize it through the media, something that didn't exist in the past.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that after, 2,000 some years, society has, got rid of the Visigoths and they're not, the Mongol hordes are no longer as popular in New York City as they used to be. So it's terrific after thousands of years that we're not killing each other with broadswords in line at the supermarket. I'm not sure I'd be bragging about that. While you were talking, I managed to Google up the statistics on gun-related murder in the United States, and we totally kick Canada's ass on this. We have six times more we have 6 times more gun-related murders here in the United States than in Canada. So, I mean, don't go showing off there. You take a look at these charts. I mean, you just kind of, there's the United States, and then the numbers just sort of drop off until you literally get into war zones. So I guess I'm suggesting that the point where we have an organized society, where we have created systems of laws and in theory police that are there to enforce them, all these wonderful things that have come along with TV and the internet and all that we might stop killing each other in the midst of plenty, in the midst of civilized societies. And I think at the end of the day, we've also just got to ask ourselves, why is America the leader, and that's obviously a tough word to spit out here, a leader in these types of crimes? I mean, is it just the guns? I don't know. I don't think so.
I mean, it's probably the guns. But the one thing that I think is interesting, and again, this call me an optimist, but I remember
You're an optimist.
recently hearing about a medical trial that they were doing here in Pittsburgh, where I live, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they essentially drain, like if you get shot, if you're a gunshot victim, they drain out your blood, pump in saline, and basically put you in suspended animation so they can operate and save your life. So in terms of talking about, how do we fix the gun problem? I mean, maybe the way we fix it is just by becoming invulnerable to bullets. And by that, I mean, it may be a problem until, getting shot with a bullet is to, the future what getting an infected cut on your thumb was to 150 years ago, or whenever they invented
a gunshot.
There could be like this whole new plastic surgery thing where instead of Botox, we inject depleted uranium into people's faces. And so the bullets will just bounce right off like Superman. There's actually people who sell armored backpacks for kids. They actually have like a Kevlar plate in the backpack so that when your kid is running out of a mass shooting, this is not made up, running out of a mass shooting situation, they can use the backpack as kind of a shield, against all this. So there you go. I think we've solved that problem. Terrific. Good.
It's only the first time. It's only the first podcast.
Yeah.
Bullet-resistant humans.
Well, look, I mean, this isn't the first time someone said, hey, let's solve the violent murder problem. In the 80s and 90s, they created very harsh penalties to make sure no one is ever allowed out of jail. And now, the last 2 days, we have the Glossop execution, we have the other one. Uh, you know, Everyone's saying that there's innocent, they might be innocent, his guilt is in doubt. And is this a way to deal with the with the violent murder issues, to give people the death penalty? Eric?
It may deal with that
That's a
guy.
difficult question. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
But I mean, keep in mind again that the United States is the last Western industrialized country that still executes people. We are, I think, third or fourth or fifth in line behind China, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, and some other people that really don't make good company for us. So I don't know that executing people does much more than get rid of one particular murderer. And that's assuming we haven't just thrown the first black guy we could find in jail and said, well, that guy must have done it, which unfortunately has a long, sordid history in the United States. And for locking people up, the United States, again, has the largest prison population in the world. We have 2.2 million people behind bars, close to 1% of our whole population. If you actually throw in everybody who's under some form of restraint, prison, jail, probation, parole, all those different forms, it's close to 3% of our entire population. Now, we can't really put too many more people in jail without sort of starting to dedicate whole states to it. I actually am in favor of fencing off Texas for that purpose, but that's a different story. So I'm all, if somebody is a bad guy, let's lock him or her up. And if it's a true murderer and somehow we magically know there's no ambiguities, I don't have a problem with an execution.
But we don't magically know that they're definitely guilty. It's no way to know. And isn't the creation of these stiffer penalties and the fact that we have 3% of Americans in some form of supervision, isn't that a knee-jerk reaction to the crime problem, just like you're proposing to the?
Well, if all Americans were in jail, we'd probably have fewer gun deaths. That may be a way to kind of take Josh's idea of bulletproof humans. If we basically lock up the non-criminals in these high security facilities and just let the criminals,
So reverse
I mean,
versus.
this could actually, just let them run wild out there. Eventually Darwin would take over, and at some point the rest of us could just kind of, get out and say, ooh,
Are you
that's
saying
done.
that we should institute a purge day?
Purge would work. I was thinking about that old movie, Escape from New York. I don't know if you remember that. Basically, they turned the entire island of Manhattan into a prison colony, and they would just sort of like a mini Australia back in the day, and they would just dump prisoners here. But we would do the opposite. We would put normal people, non-criminal people in jail, sort of protective custody. Could work.
To get back to the death penalty point, I definitely understand why people like it. I mean, it's very much a vengeance kind of thing. It's vengeance is justice, and where does that line meet? But what I think that we should do as far as the death penalty goes is, if we're going to say it's okay for the government to kill a person, I mean, it needs to be infallible. It needs to be, and as you said, Igor, there's really no way to make it infallible. But I did a piece, I'd say maybe 3-4 months ago, where there was a prosecutor who, it was one of the most moving sort of pieces of video. Like, rarely when we're doing this I'm desensitized enough that I watch the video and just figure out where best to embed it in the article. But this guy, he actually was talking about how he felt knowing he sentenced an innocent person to death, and knowing that he only did it to get the win. That was all that was important to him back then. And he called it, state-assisted vengeance. And I think he made the best case ever for why the death penalty is just backwards stupid, and part of that thing that in Americans that we want to see people who are labeled criminals punished, and in a mean way and in a brutal way because, of anger or fear. Back to that original question, why are we so scared?
If I could interject too, I think in the United States there's a massive problem with guilty until proven innocent. It's not innocent until proven guilty because you're basically stacked with a bunch of charges right off the bat. And generally then you try to negotiate some of them off by accepting blame. And if you're completely innocent, here you are accepting blame for things that you didn't do. And so the system is already stacked against you in that way. The real question too, it comes down to is, do harsher penalties deter crime? And I mean, that's been a debate that many intellectuals have had for decades and decades.
That's not really a debate. I mean, it's like saying that climate science is a debate. I mean, there's pretty much a consensus that the higher penalties just don't deter criminals. So it's not really an argument. It's just people spitting in the
most
face
recent
of
report on that said, the most recent report on that said that the study authors found, and I don't remember again off the top of my head who did that, but they said that the authors found that in the moment of committing the crime that these death penalty defendants were committed, the thought of what would happen to them never even entered their mind. It was rage, it was passion, all that. So in those moments, you're not thinking, oh shit, I might get put to death. You think, you have to kill this person or whatever a person thinks when they commit that crime.
Another thing that influences it too is the consistency of the punishment being carried out, not necessarily the severity of it. If you consistently know that you're going to get this punishment, then it might deter you more than if you think, oh, I could get the death penalty or I could get a slap on the wrist.
Well, I mean, that's also why I think that the whole gun control debate is kind of pointless because, okay, you can make all these stiff laws against having a gun, but you're getting it to use it. If you're fine with murdering a person, why would a misdemeanor gun possession law deter you from having the gun in the first place?
And look at it in the case of marijuana. I mean, marijuana is illegal across the board in most places, but people still smoke it. Nobody really cares.
Yeah. With the guns, I think it's the one different take on it is to try to reduce the number of physical guns in circulation and reduce the lethality of the guns in circulation, and over time hope that see what that does to the murder rate. I mean, obviously people get inflamed with passion and they commit acts of murder, but circling back to the fairness of the laws, the execution that just took place in Georgia, where a woman was executed for planning the murder of her husband. It's very important to remember that the guy who actually committed the physical murder, who did the killing, received a life sentence, not execution. The woman was executed for the planning. And that all came down to who had a lawyer who told them to do X, Y, or Z. In the case of the man who got life, he was told by his lawyer to plead guilty to a lesser charge than first-degree murder, and so he wasn't executed for it. The woman who didn't get that advice ended up being executed. Leaving aside the question of life in prison, whether that's better or worse than being executed, I don't know. But it asks the question of how fair this system is, and in fact, sort of answers it at the very same time.
Well, that's the other component to it too, is right. No one actually gets those penalties that you're supposed to get. 98%, I think, of all federal trials end in a settlement. Don't we need to take a step back and stop having these? Like Peter mentioned, Norwegian prisons, and they're all centered on rehabilitation. It feels like America doesn't really care about rehabilitating prisoners, just keeping them out of the general population for as long as possible. Don't we need to review those laws we made in the 80s and 90s and maybe apply some common sense like we started doing just only a little bit with the mandatory minimums for drug possession?
Well, no one ever lost any votes by trying to appear too tough on crime. So I think that, especially at the local level where a lot of these laws really, really matter, people like it when someone says we're going to be tough on the guy who breaks into your house, or if someone commits a murder, we're going to get vengeance rather than justice. I mean, that it's comforting to people because, again, if you're if you're the victim, you obviously feel way more less rationally about the problem and the legal ethos of the United States. You want to see the person who hurt you punished, and I think that it probably all started from a good intention, that people wanted to deliver that to, their constituents, whether you're a judge or a prosecutor or what have you. But then once it started working, once people were like, oh, wow, you were reelected with 90% of the vote. Let's keep people in jail for even longer. And then it sort of snowballed out of control until we now live in a culture where if you're accused of a crime, you might as well just give up. There's, nothing left for you here.
Go to Canada.
All right. I think we need to get off of this. What? No, go ahead.
No, I mean, that would be bad enough, as Josh described it. But in fact, when you look at the disparity between rich and poor and how they get treated in the justice system, it gets even sadder. Maybe not for this forum, but when I was a younger person, I got in trouble for something, and we hired the stupidest lawyer in the world, and I got sort of penalized. When I was a little bit older and I got into a little bit of trouble over something, I hired a really good lawyer, and the tricks and trades, the way that lawyer was knowledgeable enough to work with the system, impacted me extremely positively. There was a huge difference. And if anyone has ever had the opportunity for jury duty, boy, jump on that, because it's not like you see on TV. There's people who have great lawyers who get them off, and there's people who have no lawyers, public defenders who get crapped on by the courts. And it just adds another level of injustice to the justice system. You get the justice you can pay for, as people say, not the justice you deserve.
By the way, we're getting some breaking news via latest.com. The Glossop execution was stayed for 37 days to allow the Department of Corrections to review the case. So, see, latest.com. You stay on top of it.
Solved done.
Shameless plugs.
Stop an execution.
All right, let's get off of this. Let's talk about. We're all talking about solutions and solution-oriented. Here's a solution.
I feel like we need to head to Trump.
Yeah, by 2050, human-on-robot sex would be more common than human-on-human sex. So, is there anyone on this panel?
Peter?
Is there anyone on this panel who wouldn't buy a sex robot immediately when it was released? Are these the first four guys standing in line like
I would
at
always
the
wait
iPhone
6 months.
line?
You gotta wait 6 months while that
Peter
all
will be
the bugs
first
get
in
worked
line.
out.
Peter's actually a beta tester.
I've already had improper thoughts about my Roomba.
Well,
you gotta get the upgrades for it.
The guy who created the report, what he was saying is, how mainstream online pornography and the excessive usage of online pornography has become, and now with the virtual reality headsets, that's going to change everything, especially when you pair them with the sex toys. So by 2025, we're all going to be banging computers pretty much. Is this a new sexual revolution where we're pretty much going to stop having sex with each other and just have sex with computers?
Without putting too much thought into it, my basic answer will be it'll kind of be very similar to how fleshlights are now or other sex toys. It'll be something that people buy, something that people use, but it won't be something people brag about because it always will tie into the notion of loneliness, being alone, and that's something that scares people and they don't really want to brag about that. It's just like in Japan too, where they have the whole body pillow craze. Most people don't understand it, but for the people that use them, if it's a useful tool for them and it helps them find some kind of happiness, why not?
I don't think people are going to brag about it. I think a lot of the internet searches, a quarter of all internet traffic is porn related. people are consuming porn on a pretty massive scale. Peter?
Yes, but if you were to ask people, most people would lie or shy away from the topic. Of course, everybody uses it. That's
100%. I don't even know what is. Can you guys tell me what this porn is you're talking about? Is
Yeah,
a Wikipedia page for it so I can brush up?
Yeah, how do you find that? Is that really something that's out there?
I think some of the ads.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll check back in. People have been doing everything that is unusual and available sex-wise. Literally since the bite of that apple and there forward. I think that there's a certain percentage of folks who end up with, we'll call it human sex, non-partnered sex. Let's say that, because maybe they don't have a partner. I don't know how many people, if you gave them the opportunity to sit in front of the computer and click their mouse versus having a warm, caring partner, would still choose the computer. But unfortunately, not everybody can get everything they want, and these robots have an awful lot to offer. If we want to be positive about this and not snarky and weird and creepy, think about disabled people, think about people who are in positions where they're not able to have a partnered relationship. This opens up a whole new world to them.
How expensive are they supposed to be, though? Did it make any mention?
I think there's
No, but because
things, though.
I'm getting my credit card ready.
Was there a phone number attached to this?
People will have them in their house
it's something
by
that's
2025.
But the real thing is, if they're an application for people that can't otherwise have relationships, sure, that works for some people. But if it's somebody that's maybe on the poor side, yeah, they won't be able to afford this thing if it's $5,000 or $10,000 as much as they may want it. It's just not a realistic.
No. We gotta wait till they become popular and the price comes down.
The whole idea that we'll all be having sex with robots by 2050, I don't buy it. Again,
I don't buy by 2050.
The internet,
when AI is developed.
Well, even at all, I really don't think so, because again, thanks to the internet, all right, so you have porn that is just everywhere, and it's obviously something that's really resonated with people because a quarter of internet traffic is porn. But also on the internet, there are devices and toys for men and women. There's all sorts of different ways that you can enhance the porn experience, as it were. And I would say that the majority, I don't know, I'm completely making this up, but I would hope that the majority of people, those sort of things, don't have a flashlight or don't have a real, there will be people who will have these robots, and there'll be someone who eventually probably wants to marry him. But I don't think that most people are going to go to the trouble or the expense of having one of these things when,
Well, you can always go to the dealership. I'm
Comes
sorry, you can always go to the dealership and pick up a used sex robot, right? But one other thing that we need to consider, though, is there's been multiple studies. I forget the exact percentage, but there's a significant amount of millennials, as they're called, that choose to be asexual and don't choose to go seek out sexual partners. Now, when you make this available to, don't you think that's going to go huge once you release into the... And again, we're talking about 10, 15 years before it's really available to the mainstream public.
Well, I think the real interesting story is AI. If they act like people, then we really have something to talk about. If it's just a thing with gears that people can enjoy however they want, then by all means. But
well, I'm calling it now. The first place you're going to see these is going to be like in adult playgrounds in Vegas or something like that, where you're just going to go and see what it's like. But there's just a march of technology on these topics that is hard to ignore, and the idea of free constant sex, exactly how you and the programmer can create it. It's going to be pretty hard for people to simply shy away from that. The things that are out there now are I've heard, tend to be fairly crude and kind of more novelties than anything else. But the point where it's close enough that you can sort of pretend that it's not creepy, weird, and fake. That's going to become very attractive to people. We'll keep an eye on that at yourlatest.com.
Right. Creepy. The words
Reported
creepy,
by
weird,
Peter.
the words creepy, weird, and fake immediately
Yeah.
made me think of Donald Trump's hair. So the tax plan that he released today, it's not a secret tax plan like all his other programs. It's a secret plan to make everyone happy, and everyone's going to be beautiful. It's going to be huge. It's going to be great. Now, conservative economists say his tax plan is going to actually bankrupt America because he wants to cut taxes on everyone. Eric, you wrote about the tax plan. Does any of it make sense? And is it any more possible to enact it than his ridiculous immigration policy?
It's not going to save money for the country. It's not going to generate additional money. It definitely will hurt the economy of the United States. Is it a plan that it's popular for poor people and people that are struggling, the middle class? Sure, because let's be honest, I think, I don't know the average median income for a family, but I would say it's probably between 50 or 60,000 combined in the U.S. right now for, an average family. Obviously, higher up, you're looking at maybe 100 combined, but when you can look at that, yeah, that's a great option for them. Or, a struggling student who just came out of school, now he doesn't have to pay tax, so it's more money in his pocket. Those people are going to love that. And that might be him trying to appeal to those demographics. However, all those other comments about how much he hates immigrants, how much he hates certain countries, will make it very difficult to appeal to those voters. So it's strange because he's appealing to them, but also antagonizing them at the same time. And in his tax plan as well, he does address that he's going to cut taxes for corporations. That's been a disaster. Everything since Reagan and, the trickle down and everything, it doesn't work because companies, they don't trickle down. They just hoard their wealth and they continue to just grow bigger and gobble up more until they own everything. And then he also plans to tax the wealthy, but in reality, the majority of the wealthy earn their money through capital gains, which is taxed at a much lower rate. So in reality, is this tax plan any different? No, it's just another pro-rich thing that makes it look like he cares about the lower to middle classes, but in reality, he doesn't. He's just serving himself.
Anyone?
I agree with that completely. I mean, I think that as the spotlight stays on Trump and he has to move further away from shtick and more into talking about things, presidential candidates have to talk about, the veneer is starting to fall away, even for some of the most vehement wall supporters, because it's obvious he has no idea what he's talking about.
Well, that's the beauty of Trump.
My favorite too is when he's addressing the economy.
When he's been getting by on saying, okay, I'm going to deport all the illegals, and then for everything else, he has a secret plan. It's really been his only policy to date is I'm going to build a wall, make Mexico pay for it. It's going to be huge. It's going to be beautiful. But now that he's actually, talking policy, aren't we going to see... I mean, how can actual conservatives say, yeah, we're going to support a plan that would cost $12 trillion over the next decade that we can't afford, even though it is a tax, what they love. They want to slash taxes on everyone. Isn't he also lowering taxes on the poor, which is, what Romney was rebelling against, and the 47% that don't pay their taxes? Isn't that going to hurt his standing with the people who feel that way also?
Well, I think what Trump's gambling on is... Oh, go ahead, guys.
Peter?
Trump is a classic...
Peter?
Oh man, we're gonna have. I think there's a slight delay, so it causes a bit of issues on the talking. But I'll let you go, Peter.
Trump is a classic demagogue. He says things that people want to hear, and he presents himself as kind of a target for people to project onto. And the idea that things he says don't actually make sense really isn't a problem. He has presented himself as a bizarre sort of, I don't even want to use the word candidate, just a bizarre person who says things that come to his mind and crazy stuff today and crazier stuff tomorrow. I don't think anyone expects him to be serious. The people who support him are probably not reading deep into the details of any of his tax proposals. And who knows, tomorrow he may never mention this again. But that's the nature of a demagogue. He's just trying to stir up emotion in whatever form he possibly can, and he's sort of going nah to the other candidates, saying, let's see if anybody pays attention to you.
Eric?
Well, what I find so strange about it all is that as a candidate, here he is bullying the physical appearance of people. I mean, he's a 69, I believe that's his age, 69-year-old man, and he's resorting to, high school bully tactics. And what's funny about it is he always talks about how he doesn't pander to certain audiences, but really that's all he's doing. He just makes blanket statements, oh, I'm very religious. I love the Bible. It's a great book. Okay, give me a Bible verse. Oh, Jesus was great. Of course, then they look in the Bible. Oh, that doesn't exist, Trump. So then the next debate, he shows up with a Bible that he claims is his childhood Bible with little writings in it. You know what I mean? It's gotten to the point where it's just ridiculous because now he's pandering to the religious vote. But he's not religious. Who for a second would believe that Trump is some devout religious man kneeling at the corner of his bed praying to God? He's not doing that. No chance.
Well, then, you mentioned that he's cutting taxes for the poor. I think that what he's hoping is that people, like the same people who got fooled by him carrying the Bible out, like, see, he loves God. I think they're going to think that, he's cutting taxes for everybody.
About this, not to cut you off, sorry. But for Issue Hawk today, there was a story where Jimmy Kimmel took Trump's tax reform plan and he approached Hillary Clinton supporters and he pretended it was Clinton's policy. And every one of them was like, oh, this is great. Oh, hell, Hillary Clinton, she's the best. Of course, later on he reveals, oh, no, this is actually Donald Trump's tax reform. And they're all just sitting there like, oh, so we like Trump. Uh-oh. It's like that realization that really nobody in America, at least from the mainstream, doesn't really know anything about the candidates. They just vote based on, can they smile and kiss a baby properly. And I think Trump, unfortunately, is really good at that stuff. He knows how to kiss babies.
Now,
I mean, he said he wanted to kiss his own daughter.
There, you Canadian son of a bitch. No. I do give the American voter a bit more credit. I feel like they do vote for the candidate based on not what their policies are, God bless them, but so the fact that someone said Hillary Clinton's tax policy is to give money to everybody with a baby who doesn't work. Well, people will be like, I love that. I love babies and I love people. And other people will be like, pull up your bootstraps. So it's they hear these things, and it's based on more than just looks and stuff, but the substance and how the voter can understand it. I don't know. It's being informed. They're informed, just informed with the wrong stuff, it seems. They're not reading latest.com, obviously, and Ishcock, but they should be.
Well,
it'll be interesting to see where Trump goes as. Oh, I was going to say, it's interesting to see where Trump will go as we do unpack the policy points more in a deep sense. Because if he has enough advisors around him, there's a chance that he actually might be able to get by if they can educate him enough what to say, He can't just keep saying, like, I'll let Russia fight the Middle East, or I'll just drop a bomb on Iran, I'll build a wall. Like, that stuff won't fly for long. But he is wealthy enough that he could hire a good advisor and get the right information, which is scary because, that's something that could push him in the right direction. He has the poll support. He's definitely hitting the right tones with the average Republicans. And as we were saying before, he's reaching out to more fringe
policy. We'd be done. That would be it. Just say goodbye to America.
Well, that's the thing, because he has enough money that he can get those speeches written for him. He doesn't have to understand the context of it. He just has to say it, right?
Yeah, I think Trump's evil brilliance is that he doesn't give a crap about stuff like making sense, or sure, he can get those speeches written for him and things like that, but that would just open him up to being questioned and obviously not knowing what he's talking about. I just get the impression that Trump is going to play this out as far as it goes and simply sort of say what comes off the top of his head and sort of challenge the other candidates to say something more intelligent than him. But if you're acting like a high school bully, then, and that seems to be working, I just can't see him backing away from that.
Well,
it's very easy to stand up there and say the Russians are going to have to, let the Russians take out ISIS for us. And then, you're Marco Rubio or you're Jeb Bush, and the camera comes to you and you're supposed to say something intelligent about that, and you look kind of weak.
Well, and I think it was Scott Walker too when Trump originally made the Mexican wall comment. Because Walker, I don't know if he was joking or serious, who knows with him, that he was going to build a wall for Canada. And it's just like, it's just like a counterpoint to such a stupid argument to begin with that he is actually engaging in. It's like, it's just difficult to believe that this is actually going on, because we've, for at least the last, I would say, decade or maybe slightly more, politics has been very politically correct. Everybody's been very careful and calculated. And so comments like Trump is making right now have destroyed campaigns, yet here he is in the top. And I don't know how it reflects on our society that he is in the lead after making such comments. I couldn't for a second believe Obama would get elected if he made a comment even at all similar to that. It wouldn't have happened. Yeah, it's just, and it's interesting because what's going on.
Here's the thing: Trump is who Trump has always been. Now, if Trump had just been like a demure, quiet kind of business personality, came out and said all Mexican immigrants are rapists and criminals, he would have been done before he was ever started. But Donald Trump, he is sort of unique in that he was like America's first asshole. He was. Yeah. He is
celebrity status has helped,
and I think there is a resentment. Like, I know for a fact that whenever I watch Hillary Clinton give an answer to a question, I want to tear my hair out just because of just how
I already have
many. Yeah, that's see, you're a cautionary tale, Peter. But I think people are hungry for a politician who just says what he thinks he feels. And honestly, Eric, I think that's sort of what, like, the funny joke Obama pulled on us was. He said a lot of things and we're like, he's authentic. This is for real. And then he got in office and it was just a competent president. And we're like, oh, well played then. I mean,
unfortunately, the system came into reality and he couldn't do anything, right? It's the unfortunate reality too.
I don't think it's that, but I personally, I think it's the Area 51 meeting when they sit you down, tell you all the secrets the presidents know.
Well,
and then you can't do anything. You're handcuffed.
I believe that Michelle Bachmann and the like were authentic too, as in they said pretty much what they were thinking without any kind of filter. It ain't really resonant. I mean, it did for like a week. Don't you trust the Republican voters though? I mean, they always seem to come back to the middle, whether it's Romney or McCain. They do, get reasonable after, her McCain leads for a while, Michelle Bachmann leads for a while, and then they come to their senses.
It's Iowa. It has nothing to do with, and I think that there was a story that I don't know if it went up yesterday or if it's going up today, but Reince Priebus of the RNC said that the new debates, or not the debates, the primaries, they're going to consider switching it up so that Iowa and New Hampshire aren't first anymore. Because, I mean, if you look at it, in 2008, McCain won New Hampshire, Huckabee won Iowa. In 2012, Romney won New Hampshire, Santorum won Iowa. So,
oh God.
But to be fair, and again, I feel like, didn't Obama win Iowa and Hillary win New Hampshire? Or did he, or is that backwards?
I believe, it's something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely think it's not so much even Republicans in general or Iowans in general, but Republican Iowans are part of what's yanking presidential politics.
But he's leading, we're talking about this guy who's leading in New Hampshire, in South Carolina, nationally, pretty much in every poll that's coming out. I mean, maybe, the evangelicals are placating Iowans, but Donald Trump seems to pretty much be resonating across the board for now.
Yeah. Well, here's the question, too. Which candidate is the moderate one that will win out then, in your opinion, when Donald Trump phases out?
I think Rubio also.
You think Rubio?
I was thinking Bush,
but
I really feel like that whole party is just abandoning Bush. Peter, who do you think?
Yeah,
nobody wants the Bush dynasty anymore.
Well, it's tough on the Republicans because the primary process caters to the sort of immoderate wing of the Republican Party. On a state level, you've got to bring out the crazies in order to separate yourself from the pack and win these primaries. But then you go into the general election and suddenly you've got to start making sense to a majority of Americans. And that's always been part of the problem the Republicans have had with elections. The thing about Trump is he's not going to last. I mean, he can only kind of keep doing what he's doing for so long, and I think people will tire of him. He's a reality show. He's a mockery of himself. He's kind of a self-licking ice cream cone, if you will. And it's entertaining to a certain point, and I think people will get tired of him after a while. He just keeps doing the same shtick over and over again. And I suspect that as his popularity has been declining, it will continue to decline. He looked dumb in the last debate, and I suspect he'll look dumber in the next debate. And I think as long as the other candidates sort of come up with a strategy, which is basically to ignore him, then I think he'll kind of run himself out of relevance. When they respond to him, what's that?
His war with Fox News. He's like, I'm not going on Fox News again. And then he sits down with O'Reilly and this is the second time he's pulled this.
Yeah.
I think people are finally realizing, oh, this is all he's got. There's no more.
Yeah.
There's no real there.
Yeah, and he'll run his course soon enough, and then he'll just crawl back under his rock and wait, for another 4 years or whatever, wherever he goes, during these interim periods. But it's just kind of a sad commentary that we have to go through this period of silliness before we can settle down and say, let's take a close look at who might do a decent job running our country. There are real issues out there, and it's always nice if the candidates are willing to talk about them. But as we spoke earlier, if we end up focusing on guns, gays, and abortion over and over in these elections, the real issues just lay on the side and fester, and that's never good for us.
All right, one last question before we pause until next week. So obviously there's a lot of pandering going on to Iowa voters. What state should go first instead of Iowa then? That reason will prevail. Peter?
I think it would make sense to do it either on a rotating basis or even on kind of a secret. It becomes harder and harder to pander to people. You could also consider having several states at once, pick them in a way that's more distributive of things. It's an imperfect system no matter what you do, but New Hampshire is certainly not representative of much of the rest of America, and Iowa perhaps represents a little bit wider swath of America, but to put so much emphasis on one state or two states really, I think, skews the process.
Josh?
Yeah, I kind of think that the plan that Priebus put forward, basically over a 10-week period, just 5 Super Tuesdays where 10 states go based on random lottery, that sounds as good a plan as any, because again, it will give the primaries more of a national feel. I mean, the only reason that we've had to talk about ethanol subsidies for the past 20 years is because we start in damn Iowa every election.
Yep.
And no offense
Absolutely.
to Iowa, it's a great state. They make, I'm sure they do something things other wonderful than corn. I mean, I don't know what Iowa does, but we have to care about what they think about our presidents. I remember when the first election I voted in 2000, I was really excited for the primaries, and then it was over by the time it got to PA. And I don't know, ever since then, I've thought that the primary system does need a kind of overhaul. And to be honest, with as small as America's gotten, 5 election days of 10, 2 of 25 even, seem like more than enough, because again, we have primaries for 2 years before the elections anyway. I feel like it would maybe not just give us a different look at the candidates, but I think it would actually change the way that people approach running for president. Because if you're not able to run a 10-state campaign but can open up an office in Iowa and shake hands, is that a good thing that you're maybe have as much of a shot as someone like Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush, or is it a bad thing that it means that we get people like Huckabee and Santorum and other fringe candidates? I don't actually know the answer to that question, but I definitely think we should try something else out.
Eric, as a Canadian, is there one state that is more American than the other states that maybe we should lead off with?
Yeah, what is the most American state, Eric? That's a good question.
Well, Are we talking legitimately or the one that thinks it's the most American?
Well, we all know Texas.
Because if we're going in that sense, Texas, it's tough to say because there's always going to be biases in certain states towards certain parties. And in order to avoid that, as Josh was saying, a system of randomization is what's necessary. The other solution maybe would be to pick one very Republican state and one very Democrat state. But once again, I mean, you know
Eric,
who's going to
in these
win.
hypothetical elections that Canada has, how do you do primaries?
We don't have that kind of system. So in the parliamentary system, you have the different political parties. First off, we have more than two, which is good because, let's be honest, a two-party system is kind of a disaster at times. But essentially, each party has their own person from within that they choose. Generally, who knows how the process works for that? It's honestly kind of just behind the scenes. Person's chosen, then they run for that party. But anybody can start a party. If I wanted to be in the next election, I could just go sign up and be on the ballot. Now, would I get elected? Of course not, because I don't have support. But the fact that you can do something like that is good, and that's how smaller parties like the NDP, which is actually, well, they're the opposition party currently, but if you go 10 to 15 years ago, they were very small, and now they're very large, and you have the Green Party coming up. So my solution to that is, I don't know, I think the American system is broken in every way. Me and Igor have had conversations about this before, but I don't think a system that is two-party is reflective of the entire needs of a society, and some would say that by implementing more parties, it waters down the process, and that may be true, but at least it provides better representation for everybody.
All right, well, there you go. For all the people who say they're going to move to Canada when Donald Trump gets elected, at least here we get to choose our leaders. All right, guys, this was
We're going to build a wall to
fun.
keep you guys out.
Oh, you should have done that already. This was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully, we'll be back next week. All right.
Great. Thank you.